The doomsayers were right about Donald Trump. Aided and abetted by a feckless GOP, Trump's second presidential term has already eclipsed the malfeasance of his first. Trump's bid to enrich himself and entrench his power is accelerating the erosion of America's core values and threatening the republic. Trump is making people poorer, tearing the social fabric, shutting down democratic institutions, eradicating political norms, and wreaking environmental ruin. After just 100 days in office, Trump earned the ignoble distinction of being the most unpopular president in U.S. history, and his unpopularity continues to grow. President Biden's former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan called Trump's first 6 months in office an unadulterated disaster, saying it's not just about the policy, it's that President Trump and his team have gone at the core of American advantages in the world and systematically tried to dismantle them. Andrew Coyne tried to explain the depths of the disaster, describing Trump's second term as a crisis like no other in our lifetimes. The government of the United States has been delivered into the hands of a gangster. The damage Donald Trump and his nihilistic cronies can do to America, but also to its democratic allies and to peace and security of the world, is incalculable. We are living in the time of Nero. The globe is awash with a maelstrom of crises, often referred to as the polycrisis. Trump is deliberately exacerbating these crises while systematically whittling away at the federal government's capacity to respond. He manufactures dysfunction while eroding public support for bipartisan solutions. He is driving the best and the brightest out of government while undermining the capabilities of future generations by dismantling the public education system and attacking American universities. Trump's disregard for human rights and legitimization of racism, sexism, and xenophobia is consistent with the patriarchal white fraternity that is at the core of MAGA. Trump manufactures chaos and then blames others for the chaos he creates. While this may seem like ineptitude, there is a method to Trump's madness. His fire hose of malfeasance is a distraction. His spending cuts, removal of oversight, suppression of opposition, and weaponization of lawlessness are all aimed at weakening impediments to his agenda. Trump uses disinformation to control the public narrative. He foments division as a political strategy to prevent consensus and splinter opposition. His efforts to dismantle institutions, break down order, foster tribalism, and divide people are purposeful. Inefficient and unrepresentative government serve Trump's interests, so government dysfunction is not a byproduct of his agenda. It's a central goal. Trump is eliminating oversight and firing those who do not parrot his narrative. The Trump administration has laid off hundreds of thousands of federal civil service employees, including staff at the FDA, the IRA, Veterans Affairs, and Social Security. As the ex-CDC director explained in a Senate hearing, RFK Jr., the current head of the CDC, called for the firings without cause. The Trump administration has purged career officials throughout government, divesting the civil service of many of its most capable employees while appointing unqualified loyalists in their place. Trump's weakening of the systems of checks and balances extend far beyond his control over the Republican Party. Shortly after moving into the White House, Trump fired 17 inspectors general from various agencies, including the Department of Defense, State Department, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Energy, and the Department of Transportation. Trump also moved to close several agencies, including the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that shields Americans from predatory practices. Trump has made it clear that he is seeking retribution against all those who tell the truth, not only because he is vindictive, but because he knows that fact-based assessments and science threaten his narrative and undermine his agenda. To this end, Trump fired dozens of federal prosecutors who were involved in investigating or prosecuting him and eliminated federal support for scientific research that keeps Americans safe. Trump dismisses information he does not like and fires government employees who produce reports that reflect poorly on his administration. This includes people like Erica McIntyre, Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Trump is also using firings to weaponize the Justice Department. He is firing anyone who investigated him and pressuring prosecutors to go after those who prosecuted him. Trump's DOJ is allegedly investigating former special counsel Jack Smith, and they fired those who worked with Smith. More recently, Trump indicated he wants to get rid of Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney Eric Seibert because he did not charge New York Attorney General Letitia James with mortgage fraud. Trump has used the same mortgage fraud pretext to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Susan Menares, and regulator Robert Primus. The American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, succinctly explained, Trump is firing federal workers over beliefs he doesn't like. He's using all the instruments at his disposal, including the Justice Department and the FCC, to go after anyone who dares speak truths he does not like. He is silencing voices who do not fall in line with his deceitful version of reality. This includes politicians, business leaders, but it also includes media organizations, universities, and the public. He reinforces his authoritarian fear-mongering by sending troops into democratic cities led by people of color. Although DOGE cuts are being sold as initiatives that reduce spending and increase efficiency, the national debt is spiking, and the burden is being shifted to taxpayers. As explained by a Brookings report, these cuts ignore the government's mission. But there is something far more foul afoot. The Trump administration is cutting funding to services Americans depend on, including public health. Even though the country is facing a healthcare crisis, Trump is eating away at HHS, including the CDC, and reducing spending for Medicare and Medicaid. He is eradicating food aid and housing support as Americans face surging food insecurity and homelessness. Trump is also dismantling public education while slashing funding to critical federal agencies, including the EPA, the NIH, and NOAA, as well as public media, the Postal Service, museums, and libraries. Contrary to this stated rationale, the goal is not to reduce efficiency or even to get rid of DEI hirings. As Yale University's Timothy D. Snyder succinctly wrote in an article titled The Logic of Destruction, the logic of their firings is to make the whole government fail. These firings benefit billionaires at the expense of working people. Bernie Sanders elaborated on Trump's endgame in a speech he delivered on the floor of the Senate, saying they are destroying virtually every federal program that working people depend on so they can get huge tax breaks for the rich and eventually make government so inefficient that they will have the ability, as large corporations, to come in and privatize everything. Reduced government spending enriches those at the top while impoverishing everyone else. Cuts are about usurping power and transferring the wealth of working people to the billionaire class. Trump wants to diminish the well-being of Americans to keep the masses in a state of economic insecurity. This is an effective way of diverting attention away from his agenda, and it gives him an opening to claim that difficult times require the strong leadership that he claims to provide. The best people in American federal law enforcement, national security, and national intelligence are being fired, Snyder wrote, adding, "In the logic of destruction, there is no need to rebuild afterwards. In this chaos, the oligarchs will tell us that there is no choice but to have a strong man in charge." Trump has succeeded in redefining morality for a large swath of Americans, such that criminal activity that serves his interest is no longer construed as lawbreaking. Criminality is a defining feature of Trump, his businesses, and his presidencies. Trump has the rap sheet of a bona fide criminal. He is a convicted felon and serial fraud artist who has been found guilty of sexual abuse. Trump's career in real estate started with a federal lawsuit in 1973. Then there was the Trump University grift. Before becoming president, he broke campaign finance laws by paying hush money to cover up an affair with a porn star, and in 2020 he led a coup attempt and a violent insurrection for which he was indicted. By the time he left office in 2021, Trump had 9 major cases pending. He was subsequently charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice over his refusal to hand over classified documents, and he was also indicted in Georgia for his attempt to overturn the state's 2020 election results. John McCain's former aide and political strategist Steve Schmidt and others have called Trump a White House gangster. Trump pardons people to serve his political, financial, and legal interests. Trump pardoned 9 Republican congressmen convicted of financial fraud while lauding their crimes as acts of loyalty. He pardoned January 6 rioters, including those who assaulted police. He hailed violence against police officers as a show of strength and bravery. He even gave a Justice Department job to a Jan 6 rioter who threatened police. The Trump administration moved convicted pedophile and serial child sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell from a maximum security prison to a minimum security prison. Many are calling this a quid pro quo for whitewashing Trump's association with convicted pedophile, the late Jeffrey Epstein. Everything is reversed in Trump's world. Smart laws, like common sense gun regulations, are disregarded, while women's access to reproductive health care has been criminalized. Trump manipulates the law to turn accountability on its head and create a culture of loyalty. This is upside-down accountability, where everything is backwards. Down is up, and up is down. The guilty are the innocent, and the innocent are the guilty. This is how Trump gets away with blaming others for his own misdeeds. Trump supporters don't just tolerate this immoral lawlessness, they celebrate it. As Hussein Halleck wrote, crime is no longer defined by actions, only by allegiance. To them, stomping on a police officer's heads isn't brutality if the boot belongs to their tribe. Lawlessness, to them, is power, rebellion, and identity. This embrace of criminality is strategic. Trump knows his supporters crave permission to break the system rather than fix it. Their grievance has been expertly twisted into justification for violence. Under Trump, power is morality. Loyalty is truth. Trump has redefined justice in the eyes of his supporters. The rule of law is being replaced by the idea that might makes right. There is no middle ground, no room for rational debate. Trump's followers will not rediscover decency or regret their embrace of chaos, Halleck cautions, adding, "They've shown you clearly who they are. Believe them." Trump is flouting the law. He has disregarded multiple statutes, court rulings, and he is openly challenging the authority of the courts. Trump has normalized criminality, weaponized lawlessness, and he is intimidating the judiciary. As Bernie Sanders explains, Trump's view is that if you don't like a decision that a judge renders, you get rid of that judge. You try to impeach that judge. You intimidate judges so that you get the decisions that you want. Trump is making a mockery out of the judiciary as he flouts both the rule of law and the Constitution. Al Gore said, "Our Constitution, written by our founders, is intended to protect us against a threat identical to Donald Trump." Yet Trump defies laws and ignores the authority of Congress, as laid out in the Constitution. The Constitution established a form of government with co-equal separation of powers: the executive branch, president, the legislative branch, the House and the Senate, and a judicial branch, the courts. The Trump administration ignores restrictions that limits its powers, including those in the Constitution. Although Congress has jurisdiction over spending, they have abdicated this responsibility by deferring to the president. Trump is usurping the powers of Congress by illegally and unconstitutionally withholding funds that Congress has appropriated. He bypassed congressional approval to cancel nearly $5 billion in previously approved foreign aid, including funding for the State Department and USAID. The Senate Appropriations Committee Chair, Republican Susan Collins, called the move unlawful, a sentiment echoed by senior Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer. Jeanne Shaheen, who oversees the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, called these efforts dangerous. Trump has subverted the Constitution by illegitimately pushing unfit cabinet nominees through on recess appointments without the advice and consent of the Senate. Trump is doing the same thing with top federal prosecutors in states across the country, sidestepping or overriding Senate confirmation and judicial appointments. As reported by Politico, Carl Tobias, a University of Richmond Law School professor, called the moves a perversion of what the Constitution seems to require. Trump failed to notify Congress 30 days before firing inspector generals as mandated by federal legislation. He's also decimated agencies that can only be changed or reformed by Congress. The Trump administration appears to have removed sections of the Constitution that impede its activities. In August 2025, portions of Article 1, Section 8, as well as the entirety of Article 1, Sections 9 and 10, were removed from the text of the Constitution on the Library of Congress Constitution website. Democracy is in Trump's crosshairs. He lauds authoritarian leaders and behaves like a dictator. He is systematically removing democratic safeguards, rigging the electoral system through gerrymandering and various forms of voter suppression, and forcing people, universities, law firms, corporations, courts, and the media to submit to his authority. The Founding Fathers were explicit that no one person would have unlimited powers. They wrote the Constitution to prevent exactly what Trump is doing today. Chris Hedges summarized the American predicament, writing, "Our constitutional rights, due process, habeas corpus, privacy, freedom from exploitation, fair elections, and dissent, have been taken from us by judicial and legislative fiat. These rights exist only in name. The vast disconnect between the purported values of our faux democracy and reality means our political discourse, the words we use to describe ourselves and our political system, are absurd." Trump's flouting of the Constitution threatens the foundations of America's democracy. Andrew Coyne anticipated how democracy could slip away without people noticing. The democratic levers they might once have pulled to demand change are no longer attached to anything. There are still elections, but the rules have been altered. There are certain obstacles, certain disadvantages if you are not with the party of power. Trump is at war with values that once defined Americans. This includes Enlightenment values like individual liberty, religious tolerance, scientific understanding, and natural rights that are the backbone of democracy. There was a time not too long ago when freedom, liberty, and democracy were shared values at the core of American ideals. This was a time when the U.S. saw the promotion of these values as the best way to ensure a secure and prosperous world, preserve the peace, deter aggression, and protect human rights. Under Trump's leadership, we see a transactional approach that is overtly antagonistic to these once fundamentally American values. In a speech, Vice President J.D. Vance made it clear that under Trump's leadership, the United States was no longer going to promote democracy. Vance proudly announced that the Trump administration has reversed course. He referred to a generational shift in policy away from universal secular ideals. This is not just an anti-democracy president. This is an administration that has declared war on the values that have defined America since its inception. Trump's ambitions extend beyond the U.S., as evidenced by the fact that he is unraveling the multilateral world order and the international rules-based system that has preserved the peace since the end of World War II. He is undermining the values of openness and liberalism globally, making the world mistrustful. It is too facile to say that Trump is isolationist and protectionist. As Schmidt pointed out, Trump's inaugural tirade repudiated NATO, the Atlantic Charter, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the UN Charter, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Trump is challenging constitutional democracy and undermining liberal values because they are impediments to his pursuit of power and wealth. By making government dysfunctional, he hopes to soften working people's resistance to the theft of public money. In the service of this agenda, he is slashing government support, eliminating oversight, silencing opposition, and weaponizing lawlessness. Trump is whitewashing his turpitude by getting rid of everyone involved in the investigation of Jan 6 or of his other criminal activities. Trump is undermining international norms as well as eroding core values. He has uprooted the last vestiges of the belief that through hard work and dedication, people can achieve a better life. In the process, he has pushed the American dream ever further out of reach. Trump has abandoned America's centuries-old role as the leader of the free world and accelerated the country's decline. As former Republican Senators Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger wrote of Trump's presidency, there are moments in history when you can feel the tectonic plates of power shifting under your feet, the precise seconds when empires declare themselves rotten and ready to collapse. The Trump administration is consolidating power while making people poorer and less safe. Trump demands unquestioning obedience. But as Mark Milley reminded Americans in his final speech as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or dictator, and we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. America is a republic, which means supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, and which has an elected or nominated president rather than a monarch. This is the message behind the No Kings movement, which organized one of the largest protests in American history. The United States was born out of a revolutionary war that pitted Enlightenment values against the imperial rule of a king. This act of defiance gave birth to a nation and helped lay the groundwork for democratic societies and constitutional governments around the world. Trump's limitless greed and lust for power brazenly betrays the aspirations of the American Revolution. If the values that they fought and died for keep sinking into black waters, the dream will break apart and the republic will be lost.